The throne room of the Draconian Star Empire was a terrifying and beautiful place. It was carved from a single, massive piece of black rock from a dead star. The ceiling was so high it was lost in shadow. Light came from floating orbs of blue fire that cast long, dancing shadows. On a towering throne of obsidian and bone sat Empress Yuna. She was magnificent. Her body was covered in scales that shone like polished black jewels. When she moved, they clicked together softly, like stones shifting in a river. From her back, two great wings were folded, their leathery skin looking like a night sky filled with tiny, glittering stars. Her eyes were pools of molten gold, and when she was angry, a faint smoke would curl from her nostrils. She was power made flesh. Standing next to her throne was a man who looked like a ghost in comparison. His name was Minsu. He was her husband, the imperial consort. He was a human. He had no scales, no wings, no fire inside him. His skin was soft and pale. His hair was a simple, dark brown. He wore plain, dark robes instead of gleaming armor. To the draconian lords and ladies in the room, he was a strange, fragile thing. The court was full of these draconians. They were all tall and strong, with scales of red, green, or bronze. They spoke in deep, rumbling voices. They valued strength above all else. They saw Empress Yuna as the pinnacle of that strength. They saw Min Su as a weakness. A large draconian general, his scales the color of dried blood, stepped forward. His name was Garrick. "Your Majesty," he boomed, his voice echoing in the vast hall. "The Taurian rebels have been crushed. Their world now belongs to the Empire. We took their resources as is our right." Yuna nodded slowly, her golden eyes fixed on him. "And the population, General Garrick?" "Those who did not swear loyalty were eliminated," Garrick said, a hint of pride in his voice. He glanced at Minsu. "It is the way of strength. The strong take. The weak submit. It is a simple, pure truth." Minsu did not react. He simply stood, his hands folded in front of him, his face calm. He looked like a man listening to the weather report, not the destruction of a world. From her throne, Yuna saw the look Garrick gave her husband. A flash of fire warmed her throat, but she swallowed it. "Your efficiency is noted, General," she said, her voice cool. "You may go." Garrick bowed, but as he turned, his eyes swept over Minsu one more time, full of contempt. The message was clear. He thought Yuna was growing soft because of her human pet. The court session continued for another hour. More reports of conquests, of new stars added to the Empire's map. Through it all, Minsu remained silent and still. He only moved to occasionally pour a cup of water for Yuna from a crystal pitcher, his movements quiet and precise. Finally, Yuna raised a hand. "The court is dismissed." The Draconians bowed and filed out, their heavy footsteps fading. Soon, the great throne room was empty, save for the Empress and her consort. The moment they were alone, the atmosphere changed. The rigid power in Yuna's shoulders softened. She let out a slow breath, and the smoke from her nostrils vanished. She looked at Minsu, and her golden eyes were no longer fierce, but warm. Minsu smiled. It was a small, gentle smile that reached his soft, brown eyes. "You are tired," he said. His voice was quiet, a soothing contrast to the booming echoes of the court. "It is wearying," Yuna admitted, leaning back on her throne. "Sometimes, it feels like the Empire is just a collection of problems waiting for me to solve them with fire and fear." Minsu walked over to her. He was not afraid to come close, even when her inner heat was radiating from her scales. He reached out and placed his hand on her arm. His touch was cool and gentle on her hard, warm scales. It was a feeling she had come to cherish. "That is why you have me," he said, "to remind you that not everything needs to be solved with fire." She covered his hand with her own, her clawed fingers careful not to scratch him. "You are my balance, Minsu, my quiet place." This was what she believed with all her heart. The Draconian Empire was built on a simple idea: the strong rule. She was the strongest, so she ruled. But it was a lonely, constant fight. Minsu had come as part of an alliance with Earth, a planet full of people who seemed so peaceful. They had no great physical power. Their technology was good, but not for war. It was for farming and building and talking that a T first, taking a human husband, was a political move. But she had grown to love him. He was clever. He saw patterns in trade and star maps that her generals missed. He could calm a tense meeting with a few soft words. He would read to her from human books about philosophy and art, things her people had never had time for, that he was benign. He was safe. He was the one thing in her violent world that was not a threat. Come, she said, standing up. Let's walk in the garden. The imperial garden was under a great glass dome. Under it, Yuna could not fly in her full dragon form, but she could stretch her wings. Strange, sweet-smelling flowers from a dozen worlds grew there. It was Minsu's favorite place. He had taught the robotic gardeners how to care for earth plants. A small patch of green grass and simple white flowers now grew in one corner. Yes, they walked. Yuna watched him. He stopped to touch a flower's petal, his movements slow and respectful. General Garrick hates me, Minsu said, not looking at her. Yuna snorted, a puff of smoke escaping. Garrick is a fool. He thinks strength is only about who can hit the hardest. He does not understand the strength it takes to be gentle in a harsh world. But he is not alone in his thinking, Minsu said. Many in the court believe I make you look weak. Let them think what they want, Yuna said, her voice firm. They do not see what I see. They see a soft human. I see the man who helped restructure our grain shipments to stop a famine on 3 worlds. I see the man who found a peaceful solution with the Ryland traders, saving us a fleet and countless lives. That is a different kind of strength. My kind of strength breaks things. Your kind, it builds. It fixes. Minsu looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment. And you value that? The building. More than you know, Yuna said, her voice dropping. Sometimes I grow tired of breaking things. Later that night, in their private chambers, Yuna watched Minsu sleep. He looked so vulnerable. His chest rose and fell with a slow, steady rhythm. His hands, which were so clever and gentle, were relaxed on the silken sheets. A protective wave of love washed over her. This was her secret, precious thing. Her gentle human in a universe of claws and fire. She would let the court sneer. She would let Garrick grumble. She would protect Minsu from all of it. He was worth it. She believed with absolute certainty that he was the one who needed protecting. She was the dragon, the empress of 1,000 worlds. He was the quiet man from a peaceful planet. The thought that he could ever be a danger to anyone was laughable. He was her sanctuary. He was benign. She closed her eyes, the image of her gentle husband safe in her mind, completely unaware of the weapon he kept hidden or the deadly skills sleeping beneath his calm surface. She slept, dreaming of quiet gardens, while the storm gathered just outside her door. Minsu took a single step forward. His posture was different. The slight slouch of scholar was gone. He stood straight, his shoulders square, his body balanced on the balls of his feet. It was the posture of a spring, coiled and ready. The boy wishes to die first? Garrick mocked, shifting his aim from Yuna to Minsu. A noble, if foolish, sentiment. Minsu's hand went to his left wrist, to the simple metallic bracer he always wore. It was a human ornament Yuna had thought a piece of his culture. With a faint, almost inaudible click, a seam opened in the bracer. He did not draw a blaster. He did not draw a plasma sword. What appeared in his hand was a handle, sleek and unadorned. And from that handle there was nothing, just a faint shimmer in the air, like heat rising from asphalt. Put that toy away, human, Garrick snarled and fired. The plasma bolt, capable of vaporizing steel, shot across the room. Minsu moved at IT was not a dodge. It was a blur. His body flowed to the side with an impossible speed, the plasma bolt passing through the space where he had been a microsecond before. In the same motion, his arms swept upward. There was no loud clash, just a soft parting sound, like a razor through silk. The barrel of Garrick's plasma cannon, along with the top half of the weapon, slid cleanly off and clattered to the floor. The cut was perfectly smooth, as if the incredibly dense alloy was nothing more than soft butter. Garrick stared in stunned disbelief at the ruined weapon in his hands. The throne room was utterly silent. The Ashen Claw warriors stared, their weapons lowering in confusion. Minsu stood between the Empress and her conqueror, the invisible blade held loosely at his side. His eyes were still cold, still calm. He had not even broken a sweat. The benign husband was gone. In his place stood a weapon, and he had just been drawn. The peace of the onyx spire did not last. The disdain Yuna had seen in General Garrick's eyes was not just the grumbling of a traditionalist. It was the spark of a rebellion. He and his faction, the Ashen Claw, had spent months planning, waiting for the right moment. That moment came when the main bulk of the Imperial fleet was deployed to a distant border, a conflict Yuna now suspected Garrick had engineered. The first sign was the silence. The constant, low hum of the spire's energy grid faded into nothing. The floating blue fire orbs in the throne room flickered and died, plunging the vast hall into an emergency-lit gloom. Then the alarms began. They were not the low warning bells of a drill, but the piercing, panicked shrieks of a direct assault. Yuna was on her feet in an instant, her royal robes seeming to melt away as her body shifted. Her humanoid form expanded, scales rippling and hardening. Her wings, once folded tightly against her back, snapped open, their star-filled membrane casting eerie shadows. In seconds, the graceful Empress was gone, replaced by a full draconian war form, a creature of myth and terror. Smoke poured from her nostrils. Minsu, who had been reading a data slate in their chambers, was at her side immediately. His face was calm, but his eyes were alert, scanning the darkening throne room. The shields are down. Yuna growled, her voice a deep rumble. They're inside the spire. The guard will hold them, Minsu said, his voice steady. But even as he spoke, the sounds of battle echoed from the corridors beyond the great doors. The sizzle of plasma fire, the roar of draconian challenge, and the screams of the dying. The massive doors of the throne room, forged from star metal and thought to be impregnable, glowed red, then white. With a deafening explosion, they blew inward, shattering into molten chunks. Through the smoke and debris marched General Garrick, flanked by a dozen of his Ashen Claw warriors. Their scales were coated in a dull, ash-gray paint, and their eyes glowed with a hostile red light. Yuna, Garrick bellowed, hefting a massive plasma cannon. Your reign of weakness is over. The Ashen Claw will restore the Empire to its true path, a path of pure strength. Yuna did not answer with words. She answered with fire. A torrent of brilliant blue-white flame erupted from her maw, washing over the front line of warriors. They screamed as their armor superheated and their scales blackened. The air filled with the smell of ozone and burnt flesh. The throne room became a battlefield. Yuna was a whirlwind of destruction. Her tail, tipped with a blade-like spur, swept warriors off their feet. Her claws ripped through armor. Her teeth snapped bones. She was the Empress, and she was magnificent in her fury. Minsu was not idle. He did not have her power, but he had his wits. He stayed close to the base of her throne, using its massive structure for cover. He was not a warrior, but he was clever. He used a small device on his wrist to override the control of a decorative floating orb, sending it smashing into the face of a warrior who tried to flank Yuna. He pointed out targets to her, his calm voice cutting through the chaos. Left, my love. The one with the sonic disruptor. Yuna followed his guidance, crushing the warrior before he could aim his weapon. For a moment, it seemed they might hold. The Empress and her consort fighting back to back. But Garrick had planned for this. He had not come expecting to defeat Yuna in a fair fight. He had come with tools. Now, he roared point two of his warriors, hanging back from the main fray, raised long, rifle-like devices. They did not fire bolts of plasma. Instead, they emitted a low, pulsing wave that was barely visible to the eye, a distortion in the air. The moment the wave hit Yuna, she staggered. A pained roar tore from her throat. It was a sonic disruptor tuned specifically to the unique biology of the draconian inner ear. For a species that navigated solar winds and the silence of the void, it was agony. The world tilted and spun. Her fierce coordination vanished. She stumbled, her wings flapping erratically. She fought through the pain, incinerating one of the disruptor wielders, but the damage was done. Garrick saw his opening. He lunged, dodging a weak burst of her fire, and swung the butt of his plasma cannon hard against the side of her head. The world went black and white for Yuna. She crashed to the floor, the impact shaking the entire room. She tried to rise, but her body would not obey. The sonic disruptor's whine was a drill in her skull. She was dazed, defeated. Through blurred vision, she saw her remaining guards fall. The throne room grew quiet, save for the crackle of fires and the heavy breathing of the victorious Ashen Claw. Garrick stood over her, his scaled lips pulled back in a triumphant sneer. He placed a heavy foot on her neck, pinning her head to the cold floor. "You see," he spat, his voice full of venom. "This is what your softness has brought you. You brought a creature of peace into the heart of power. You let his weakness infect you. You thought you could change what we are. You were wrong." He raised his plasma cannon, aiming the glowing barrel between her eyes. "The Empire will be cleansed. It will be strong again. And your human pet," Garrick chuckled, a nasty, grating sound, "he will be the first to die, so you can watch your failure before the end." Yuna's heart shattered, not from the fear of death, but from the truth in his words. She had failed. She had failed her people, her empire, and most of all, she had failed Minsu. She had been so proud, so sure of her own strength, that she had blinded herself to the threat. And now, her gentle, benign husband would die because of her mistake. She managed to turn her head just slightly, her golden eyes seeking his. She wanted her last sight to be of him. She wanted to mouth an apology, to tell him she was sorry for not being strong enough to protect him. She found him. He was standing near the shattered throne, his simple robes looking out of place in the carnage. He was not running. He was not hiding. He was just watching. And then she saw his face that it was not the face of the man she knew. The gentle kindness was gone. The softness in his eyes had vanished, replaced by a cold, flat calmness that was more terrifying than any draconian rage. It was the expression of a man looking at a broken tool, a problem to be solved. It was the look of a predator. Garrick followed her gaze and laughed. "Look at him. He does not even understand what is happening. He is frozen in fear. This is the being you chose over your own kind? Pathetic." Yuna stared at Minsu, her mind reeling, unable to process the transformation. The man she thought was a fragile treasure was looking at the scene not with terror, but with an unnerving, analytical stillness. Garrick turned his attention back to her, his finger tightening on the trigger of his cannon. "Goodbye, Empress." Yuna closed her eyes, waiting for the end, her final thought a prayer that Minsu's death would be quick, that it was in that moment of absolute defeat that the silence was broken. Not by a roar or a blast or a plea, but by a single soft, clear word that cut through the air like a knife. No, the voice was Minsu's. But it was not the gentle tone he used when reading to her. It was quiet, yet it carried a weight of absolute authority. It was a voice that was used to being obeyed. Yuna's eyes snapped open. Garrick paused, the trigger half pulled, and turned his head in amused annoyance. For a long second, nobody moved. The only sound was the sputtering of the severed plasma cannon in Garrick's hands as its internal power cell died. The Ashen Claw warriors stared, their minds struggling to understand what their eyes had just seen. The soft human had moved faster than any of them could track. He had cut through star metal with what looked like empty air. Garrick was the first to break from his shock. Rage, hot and humiliated, replaced his confusion. He threw the broken cannon aside with a roar. "You insect," he bellowed, his claws extending. "A trick with light and a sharp blade. You are still just a human." He lunged, a massive, scaled fist shooting out to crush Minsu's skull. It was a blow that could punch through a ship's hull. Minsu did not retreat. He flowed forward, inside the arc of the punch. His body was a whisper of motion. The invisible blade in his hand flickered upward. There was no dramatic clash, just that same soft, slicing sound. Garrick roared again, but this time it was a scream of pain and shock. He stumbled back, clutching his arm. The armored gauntlet, and the hand inside it, were still clenched in a fist, but they were no longer attached to his arm. They lay on the floor between them, fingers twitching. Thick, dark blood began to pour from the cleanly severed wrist. The warriors finally stirred, raising their weapons. But they were hesitant, confused. Their leader had been disarmed in both senses of the word by a creature they thought was harmless. "Kill him!" Garrick shrieked, cradling his stump. "Fire! Burn him to ash!" Two warriors at the back leveled their plasma rifles. But Minsu was already moving. He became a ghost among them. He did not fight with power. He fought with precision. Every movement had a purpose. Every step was placed. He ducked under a wild swing from a warrior on his left, and as he moved, his blade passed through the warrior's leg at the knee. The Draconian crashed down with a bellow of surprise and agony. Mitsu didn't even look back. He was already sidestepping a blast of plasma, his free hand coming up to grab the barrel of the rifle. He didn't try to wrestle it away. He simply guided it, turning it toward another warrior who was about to fire. The second warrior was hit square in the chest by his ally's blast and was thrown backwards. That was not a battle. It was a dissection. Minsu moved through them like a surgeon removing diseased tissue. He disabled them. A sliced tendon in a shoulder here, a cut power cable on a weapon there, a swift, precise strike to the back of a knee. He did not kill unless he had to. When a warrior managed to get too close, his invisible blade would find a gap in their armor at the neck or under the arm, and that warrior would fall, never to rise again. But his goal was not slaughter. His goal was neutralization. He was efficiency made flesh. There was no anger in his face, no battle cry in his throat. His expression remained that same, unnerving calm. He was solving a problem. Yuna could only watch, her body still pinned by weakness and the sonic disruptor's lingering effect. Her mind was a storm of disbelief. This was her Minsu, the man who grew quiet in a loud argument, the man who tenderly cared for his little patch of earth flowers. This whirlwind of death was the same person. She saw the way he moved. This was not luck. This was not a hidden talent. This was a skill honed over thousands of hours. This was a level of training she could not even comprehend. Her draconian warriors fought with brute force and fiery passion. Minsu fought with the cold, beautiful perfection of a mathematical equation that in less than a minute, it was over. The Ashen Claw warriors were on the ground. Some were dead. Most were wounded, disarmed, and disabled, moaning in pain and shock. The two with the sonic disruptors had been his first priority after Garrick. Their weapons were now neatly sliced into useless pieces. Garrick was on his knees, clutching his bleeding arm, his face a mask of pain and hatred. He stared at Minsu as if seeing a monster from a nightmare. Minsu stood in the center of the carnage. His simple robes were unstained. His breathing was even. The invisible blade was still in his hand, its presence only shown by the faint shimmer in the air. He looked down at Garrick, his eyes as calm as when he had been reading a data slate. The silence that fell was heavier than before. It was a silence of absolute, terrifying revelation. Then, Minsu moved again. He walked toward Yuna. Garrick flinched, thinking the final blow was coming, but Minsu ignored him completely. He stepped over fallen warriors as if they were merely rocks on a path that he knelt beside Yuna. The coldness in his eyes softened, but only a little. It was replaced by a sharp, professional concern. "Yuna," he said, his voice quiet again but different. It was the voice of a medic assessing a patient. "Can you move?" The sonic disruptor's effect is temporary, but it will take time to fade. He reached for her, his fingers going to her neck, checking her pulse with a clinical precision. His touch, which she had always found so comforting, now felt foreign. This was the touch of a soldier, a guardian, an operative. She flinched away, a low growl rumbling in her damaged throat. The fear and confusion in her golden eyes were plain to see. That he paused, his hand hovering in the air. He saw the look in her eyes. He saw the shattered trust. He gave a small, slow nod, as if he had expected this. He did not try to touch her again. "The immediate threat is over," he said, his tone factual. "But the spire is not secure. We need to get you to a safe room." He stood up and turned back to the ruined entrance of the throne room. He raised his wrist to his mouth. and spoke into his bracer, his voice clear and commanding. "This is Ghost One. The throne room is neutralized. The package is secure but immobilized. I need a cleanup crew and a medical team to my location immediately. The Ashen Claw coup has failed." A crackly, professional voice came back from the bracer. "Copy that, Ghost One. Teams are en route. ETA 90 seconds. Good work." Minsu turned back to look at Yuna. The shimmer of his blade vanished as he returned the handle to his bracer. He was just a man in simple robes again, standing in a room full of broken draconians. But the illusion was shattered forever. The ghost of the weapon he had drawn still hung in the air between them, that he had saved her life. He had saved her empire. But as she looked at him, the man she loved was gone, replaced by a terrifying stranger. The benign husband was a lie, and she had no idea who or what was standing in front of her now. The silence in the throne room was broken by the sound of swift, efficient footsteps. A squad of humans, not draconians, entered. They wore sleek, black combat armor that made no sound. They moved with the same quiet purpose as Minsu. They ignored the fallen Ashen Claw warriors, stepping over them as if they were furniture. Two of them went straight to Yuna with a medical kit. Minsu spoke a quiet word to them, pointing to the side of her head. "Sonic disruptor, draconian specific frequency. She needs a neural stabilizer." One of the medics nodded and pulled a small device from his pack. He approached Yuna carefully. "Empress, this will help with the dizziness." "May I?" Yuna, her mind still reeling, gave a stiff, slow nod. The human placed the device against her neck. There was a soft hum, and the terrible spinning in her head began to fade. The weakness in her limbs receded. She could move again. She slowly, painfully, pushed herself up on her elbows. She watched as the other humans efficiently secured the room. They used strange energy binders on the captured Ashen Claw warriors, including Garrick, who was still glaring with pure hatred. They were not rough, but they were utterly firm. They were in complete control. Minsu stood to the side, letting them work. He was watching Yuna, his expression unreadable. When the room was secure, he walked over to her again. He knelt, keeping a respectful distance. "Yuna," he began, his voice soft. It was the voice she knew, but now it sounded like a recording. "A mask. I know you have questions." She finally found her voice, a low, damaged rumble. "Who are you?" He allowed a slow breath. "My name is Minsu. I'm your husband." That part was never a lie. "Then what was a lie?" she asked, her golden eyes burning into his. "The gentleness? The peace? Was it all a performance?" The word felt like ash in her mouth. "No," he said, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of genuine emotion in his eyes. "It was pain. The way I feel for you is not a lie. It is the most real thing I have ever known. But my purpose for being here, that was something else." He gestured around the ruined throne room. "You see the Draconian Empire as a family you must protect and lead. My people, the leaders of Earth, see it differently. They see the most powerful military force in this part of the galaxy. A force that conquers worlds because it can. A force that could, one day, look at Earth and decide it wanted it." He paused, letting her process this. "Earth is not a warrior culture. We do not have your strength or your fire. Our history is filled with wars. Yes, but we learned that the greatest victory is the battle you never have to fight. Our strength is in our minds, in information, in preparation. So you sent me a spy," Yuna said, the word tasting bitter. "I am a ghost," Minsu corrected gently. "The best of what we have. My mission was not to spy for secrets to use against you. It was to ensure the alliance held, to make sure the empire remained stable, and that you remained on the throne. You are a fair ruler, Yuna. Just one. The generals like Garrick, they are not. My mission was to be a safeguard, a hidden weapon, placed right at the heart of power, to make sure that weapon was never turned on my home." He looked at his bracer. "This weapon, a monomolecular filament blade, is a human invention. It is so sharp it can cut between atoms. We have many such technologies, but we keep them quiet. We'll let the galaxy think we are benign, peaceful. It is our greatest defense." Yuna stared at him, the pieces falling into a terrible, cold picture. All this time, you have been studying us, learning our weaknesses. To protect you, he insisted, his voice intense. And to protect Earth. Every trade route I help you optimize, I also learned your supply lines. Every defense grid I consulted on, I mapped its flaws. I have spent years building a complete picture of how to dismantle the draconian war machine, piece by piece, without firing a single shot from a fleet. It is a plan I prayed I would never need. He looked toward the captured Garrick. I needed it today, but not for conquest. To save you. He reached out, slowly, and placed his hand over hers. His touch was warm, but it sent a shiver through her. This was the hand that held that terrible, invisible blade. I broke my cover today, he said softly. I revealed the one secret I was never supposed to reveal. I did it for you. Because I love you. The man you know is real, Yuna. He is just also a ghost. Yuna pulled her hand away. She felt a coldness inside that had nothing to do with the sonic weapon. Her entire world had been turned upside down. The gentle husband who needed her protection was a fantasy. He was a strategic mastermind, a warrior of impossible skill, a guardian who had been protecting her all along without her ever knowing. She thought of all their quiet moments. The walks in the garden. Had he been assessing the palace's defensive blind spots? When he read to her, was he analyzing her personality for potential instability? The foundation of their life together felt like it was built on sand. You let me believe you were weak, she whispered, the hurt evident in her voice. Would you have loved me if you knew the truth? He asked, his own voice barely a whisper. Would you have trusted me? Or would you have seen me only as a threat? A weapon sleeping in your bed? Yuna had no answer. He was right. The pride of a Draconian, especially an Empress, would never have allowed it. She would have seen his strength as a challenge, not a comfort. The human teams had finished their work. The room was secure. The leader of the team approached Minsu and gave a sharp nod. The area is clean, sir. The loyalist Draconian Guard has been informed and is retaking the spire. We are ready to extract you and the Empress. Minsu looked at Yuna, his eyes asking a silent question. She looked from his face to the faces of the efficient, deadly human soldiers. They were not conquerors. They were cleaners, problem solvers. They had just saved her empire without asking for anything in return. They had followed Minsu's orders without question. He had drawn his weapon, not for conquest, but for her. The truth was a painful, complicated knot in her heart. The man she loved was both the gentle consort and the lethal ghost, and she had to decide if she could love both. The days that followed were a blur of activity and quiet tension. The loyalist Draconian Guard, shamed and furious, swiftly crushed the remnants of the Ashen Claw Rebellion. The Empire was secure, but its heart was unsettled. The story of what happened in the throne room spread like stardust. The human consort was no longer a joke. He was a mystery, and mysteries in the Draconian court were either solved or destroyed. Yuna and Minsu moved through the palace like two moons orbiting the same planet, close but never touching. They ate meals in silence. They slept in the same chamber, but a vast space seemed to lie between them and the large bed. Yuna was struggling. Every time she looked at Minsu, she saw two men. One was the gentle husband who loved simple flowers and quiet conversations. The other was the cold-eyed warrior who moved like death itself. She called him to the garden. It was his place of peace, and she needed to see him there one more time. He came, dressed in his simple robes, his hands folded. He looked like her Minsu, but she knew better now. She stood by the patch of earth grass he had nurtured. I've spent my life believing in a simple truth, she began, her voice low. The strong rule is the way of the universe. I'm strong, so I rule. You were weak, so I protected you. She turned to look at him, her golden eyes filled with a storm of emotion. But I was wrong. You are not weak. You are the strongest person I have ever met. You have a strength I do not understand. It does not come from fire or scale. It comes from here. She tapped a clawed finger against her own temple. Minsu remained silent, letting her speak. All this time, Yuna continued. I thought I was the shield. I thought I was the sword. But you were the hidden blade, the final ultimate defense of my empire, and I never knew it. It makes me feel foolish. That was never my intention, Minsu said softly. My strength was meant to be a secret for both our peoples. It was meant to ensure peace. And what happens now? Yuna asked, the real question finally hanging in the air between them. The secret is out. The court is afraid. They see you as a threat. They demand I send you away. Or worse. Minsu looked at the grass at his feet. I will accept whatever you decide, Yuna. My mission is compromised. My people will recall me. If you wish me to go, I will go. The thought was like a physical pain in her chest. To lose him? The silence without him seemed unbearable. But to keep him? To have this living weapon, this reminder of her own blindness, at her side every day, she walked closer to him, her scales glittering in the artificial sunlight of the dome. Garrick was right about one thing, she said. I have changed, but he was wrong about why. He thought your gentleness made me weak. But it was your gentleness that showed me there is more than one kind of strength. And now your other strength has shown me that I do not have to carry this empire alone. She stopped in front of him. I'm not asking the gentle consort to stay, and I am not asking the human ghost to leave. She took a deep breath. I am asking you, Minsu, all of you, the man who loves flowers and the warrior who wields an invisible blade. Will you stand with me? Not behind me, not in front of me, with me. Minsu looked up, and for the first time since he had drawn his weapon, she saw the wall behind his eyes come down. She saw the love and the fear and the hope all mixed together. The real man was finally looking back at her. Yes, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Always. The next day, Yuna held court. The throne room had been repaired, but the memory of the fight was fresh in everyone's mind. The nobles were restless. General Garrick was in a cell, but his supporters were still in the room. A tall lord with bronze scales stepped forward. Your Majesty, he said, his voice dripping with false respect. We are grateful for your survival, but the presence of the human is a disruption. We have learned he is a weapon of a foreign power. How can we trust him? How can we trust you for keeping him so close? Yuna stood from her throne. She did not look at the Lord. She looked at Minsu, who stood beside her. Then she looked out at the entire court. You are correct. Yuna's voice rang out, clear and powerful. My husband is a weapon, but he is not a weapon of earth. He is my weapon, and I am his. She let her words hang in the air. You all believe in strength. So do I. But you believe strength is only one thing. You are wrong. She gestured to Minsu. His strength saved your empire. His intelligence has made it richer. His patience has prevented wars. This is the new strength of the Draconian Empire. It is not just the strength of the claw, but also the strength of the mind. It is not just the fire of the breath, but the cold, sharp precision of the blade. She turned her molten gold eyes on the bronze-scaled lord. If anyone has a problem with my husband's presence at my side, you may challenge him. Here, now. The lord paled, his scales seeming to lose their luster. He looked at Minsu, who met his gaze with that same calm, unnerving stillness. The lord remembered the stories of Garrick's severed hand, of warriors disabled in seconds. He quickly bowed his head. No, your majesty. There is no challenge. From that day forward, things were different. Yuna was still the empress, the fierce, unbreakable dragon. But now, at her right hand, was Emperor Consort Minsu. He no longer pretended to be just a gentle scholar. He began to train a new, elite unit of the Imperial Guard. He taught them not how to be stronger, but how to be smarter, how to use an enemy's strength against them, how to win a fight before it even began. The Empire entered a new age. It was still powerful and respected, but was also more stable and more secure than ever before. Enemies thought twice before moving against them. They knew the Empress had fire and fury, but they also knew she had a hidden Fong, a ghost who moved in silence and struck with impossible precision. That night, in their chambers, Yuna watched Minsu as he looked out the window at the stars. He was once again the quiet man she loved. Does it bother you? He asked without turning around. Knowing what I am, what I can do. Yuna walked over and stood beside him. She leaned her scaled body against his softer, human one. It was not a fragile thing leaning on a strong one. It was two different kinds of strength supporting each other. No, she said softly, because I also know who you are. You are the man who drew his weapon for me. Not for conquest, not for duty, for me. She took his hand, the hand that held the terrible, beautiful blade, and laced her clawed fingers with his. And that is the only truth that matters.